Hello, I'm Jake Collins, and this is Knightmare Series 8, Episode 1, which was first broadcast on the 9th of September 1994, which was my third day at secondary school. I started on Wednesday the 7th, and I was very glad to know that after completing my first 3 days in Year 7, I'd be able to come home and watch a new series of Knightmare. This array of antagonists at the beginning is visually stimulating and pleasing. Pretty exciting for what might be coming up in the series. There's a hobgoblin there, the fourth and final appearance of a hobgoblin. We won't actually be seeing one of those in the quest, unfortunately. But we will be seeing the other creatures and characters there playing a role in this series. You never really get that situation of everyone there hanging out in Marblehead together. It's purely representational. Just the antagonists you'll be seeing in the series. Lizard and Snapperjack might be happy to stand around and chat if they ever got the opportunity. But Maldame and Sylvester Hands? I don't think so. But as a Knightmare opening, get you excited for the series, that works pretty well. Unfortunately, it's all downhill from there. I remember just before the end of the summer holidays, before I started secondary school, my mum coming in through the front door from shopping, waving the Radio Times at me and saying, "Ooh, look," and showing me a publicity shot of Traegard and Majida, which has subsequently been put forward for the most awkward publicity shot, or at least Knightmare publicity shot, ever, and I can certainly see why. But I was extremely pleased to see it, and to know that even though I was going to go through the ordeal of starting secondary school in a few days, a new series of Knightmare would be there to help me through it. Of course, I didn't realise at that point just how close we'd come to not having a new series of Knightmare at all. This series, Series 8, was very nearly not made, as it turned out later on. Would it be better, it has been questioned, as Series 8 has received so much negative criticism, and rightly so, if Series 8 had never been made and Knightmare had finished with Series 7? Well, for me, at the time, starting secondary school, certainly the answer to that question would be no. This helped me a great deal through my first 2/3 of a term at secondary school. And if my mum had come back with the Radio Times that day and Knightmare hadn't been in it, I would have found the whole process much more difficult to cope with. I doubt I could have coped with it at all. A lot of mainstay people and things were being cruelly ripped from my life in 1994. I always refer to it as the end of my childhood, and looking back, Knightmare plays a big part in that. But at the time, this new series of Knightmare was the one beacon of hope in 1994, and as I say, I was extremely glad that it was around, at least for the first few weeks of broadcast anyway. I had no idea, as I said, it had only just been made without being cancelled by the new controller of CITV. I had no idea it had been cut by a third to 10 episodes. I certainly had no idea that it was going to end so badly. When I first watched this episode, having completed 3 days of secondary school, I was very happy to see it. That publicity article with photo of Tregard and Majida looking very awkward in the Radio Times was quite interesting. It had a little interview or a few comments from Jackie Suarez about Majida lightening the mood because the Dungeon Master's always so serious, which was fair enough, though not entirely accurate, I thought. It also had a few sentences about the Brolican and a smaller picture of Anthony Donovan wearing his V-Actor headset. Now, this was the first time I found out how the Brolican actually worked, and I was quite interested to read it. And of course it made me think, well, we'll be seeing the Brolican again then, and probably Grimoldine in Series 8. But of course we don't. Rather out of date of the Radio Times to tell us about that then. I think the thing I enjoyed most about that article, other than the fact that Knightmare was coming back for its 8th series, I always used to worry it wouldn't come back, and then of course the next year, 1995, that finally happened, and I had a complete nervous breakdown on Wigenholt Common in West Sussex. I think it was a cumulative nervous breakdown of a lot of things changing in my life, but Knightmare was the last straw, and, well, it was only delayed by a year when that Radio Times article was there in 1994. However, yes, I used to worry that Tregard wouldn't be in it anymore. I hadn't seen yet Time Busters without Michael Troughton or anything like that. I guess it just kind of seemed like Tregard was becoming less important, a bit of a spare part, and I was very relieved to see that the publicity shot for Series 8 was Tregard, with Majida in a new costume. Fine, I was expecting her back, of course. She'd only done 1 series. Tregard is in every episode of Series 8, but it's true he's even more becoming absorbed into the background and something of a spare part, and I was very disappointed with that. I still am. I'll just pause in saying this while Lissard is on screen still, to point out that while I was praising Lissard before, and I do enjoy watching him, I do think it's a shame that he doesn't have claws-on experience in the quest. What he really needs is a scene actually interacting with a Dungeoneer, significantly, dangerously on level 3. He never got that in Series 7 or 8. The only time he's on screen with a Dungeoneer is a few seconds with Barry, when he gets turned back from his martyr disguise. And Hordris is there too, as well as some extras. It's not enough for Lissard in the dungeon. We definitely needed to see more. When you think of Knightmare VR from 2004, and the extent of Hugo Tregard's involvement in that, not even presenting anymore, but just popping up as an avatar, it's really the direction he's going in the show at this point, becoming something of part of the background and losing his importance and significance in the show. That is a great shame, and it's just one of the many great shames about Series 8. And I'll be talking about some more of them in a bit. Now I'm going to talk about Richard, Rebecca, Angela, and Rowena, the first team of the series, because they're here making their famous, fatal, very stupid mistake. They could really do without this toilet person. Rowena, she's the leader behind whatever's going on in the quest, and in this room, It's blatantly ignoring the scroll clues and taking the wrong object. Green for a girl and black for a boy. Richard sorts that out at once. The pigeon droppings is black. The knife has a green blade. Take those two. But no, it doesn't happen. I do quite like this, actually. Fireball Alley. It's a good nightmarish puzzle. Footwork and timing puzzle, reminiscent of the early days, like those ones I was praising in Series 7. Series 8 has these good things about it, or potentially good things about it, but the net result is a complete mess that I really hate for messing up the show. But you can see the potential shining through, and I think with a 15-episode series and no shortcut and certain other changes in presentation, which I'll come on to in a bit, it would have been a perfectly adequate, excellent continuation of Knightmare. In essence, in intention, there's really nothing wrong with Series 8, but in execution, there is everything wrong with it. Now, of course, Rowena didn't want to take the knife because it's a weapon. How annoying is it when people half follow a rule or an instruction, and then you say, oh, you've lost, and they say, oh, well, it's your fault because I followed this rule or instruction. You didn't, did you? You followed half of it and therefore did it completely wrong. The rule on Knightmare has always been avoid the weapons of your enemies unless there is a clue to the contrary. It is safest to assume that all weapons fall into this category. If there is a clue that a weapon you come across may belong to a friend, take it. And what is green for a girl if not a very clear clue that this particular weapon belongs to a friend and you're going to need it? And that's why, in this scene, we can tell, as if we didn't know already, and the team themselves can tell, they're doomed already. Think of the scroll, says Trehegard. Rowena very dismissively reads it back to him, and then definitely wants the key. She also wants to take bar of gold for bribery. At least the middle advisor manages to point out pigeon droppings because it's black for a boy. It wasn't actually referring to the gender of your dungeoneer. It's referring to the gender of the two characters you're going to meet. Very stupid decision, really. Apparently there's a lot of cut discussion about whether they should follow this rule about not taking weapons or think of the scroll, and it makes the team look less completely stupid if you can see the whole thing. But we can't, can we? What we can see is the finished TV show. That's all we can ever see, and that's all we can ever judge anyone by. And in this case, I've always judged this team, particularly Rowena, very harshly for that stupid mistake. Okay, you don't often see it on Knightmare. You need to take a weapon that there is a clue to take, but you do sometimes see it. We've seen it with Helen in Series 4, Neil in Series 2. They don't normally have a problem with it. So really, it's an important life lesson. If you half follow a rule and then come unstuck, that's your fault for not knowing the rule properly, not the fault of the person who set the rule and let you know about it in its entirety. Of course, we had the scene there with Stilletta refusing to help them because they didn't have her knife. Joanne Hayward as Stilletta is an excellent part of Series 8. A glimmer of potential, really, like Fireball Alley. There's not enough time for that potential to be fully realised. Stilletta is only in 5 episodes. I think it's fair to say she's a very popular Knightmare character. Very engaging performance from Joanne Hayward. Very appropriate feeling in the quest. She's good to watch. She's good to use as part of Knightmare. It's just a shame she's lost in a big mess. So is this, the very welcome return of Motley. Paul Valentine's finally got bored of playing Fidget. Someone has realised he should be playing Motley again, as well as Sylvester Hands. This is actually the one series where Motley has more appearances than Sylvester Hands. But even so, we won't see him again after this episode, Motley, until episode 8, and then he's in Knightmare's final 3 episodes. So again, Motley's return gets rather lost. Potentially very exciting. Ooh, Motley's back, but we're not actually going to see that much more of him. And by the time we do see him again, we'll have heard about the shortcut and be starting to think, hang on, what the heck has happened to Knightmare? Of course, it's rather annoying, that scene, the way Motley knows about things that have happened since he was spell-trapped. Lord Fear's bone helmet and Brother Strange seems familiar to him. He should really only remember back to Series 6. Wrong helmet! Thank you for saying that, Paul Valentine. That's something you should be remembering. But thank goodness they did take the pigeon droppings to release Motley the statue. That's one small consolation from a disastrous clue room. And here's their death scene, of course, with Bal Shabar. I'm sure Bill Cashmore was in the studio that day because he was supposed to have done Snapperjack with Richard in the first scene of Level 2. But of course there's not going to be a first scene of Level 2 because Bal Shabar is going to roast Richard here, quite deservedly. I like this as a Knightmare death, really. Being fried by a red dragon, a victim for Bal Shabar. Good scene, but it should never have happened, really, Rowena. The rune lock on the trapdoor there, that really works better than having the rune lock over the door later in the series. I quite like the rune lock, but I don't like the reach wand. It's more veering off into that virtual reality area. Stepping on the runes to activate them would work much better, feel more nightmarish to me. And if they're on the floor, like they are there on the trapdoor, you could step on them to activate them. But no, the reach wand is required. I don't think if Richard hadn't been about to die, the rune lock would have been over the trapdoor. I doubt they could actually do the effect of the runes disappearing with them on the trapdoor. They're just kind of pasted on there to underline, well, the route to level 2 is blocked, they've screwed up, and so they're dying. We don't see any more runes on a trapdoor, and I'm sure that's because if you're actually going to be able to dispel the rune lock, it can't be on a trapdoor. So, a scene there that was atmospheric, interesting, holds promise for the rest of the series, or one aspect of it, that rune lock. But, like everything else, the use of the rune lock is going to just get worse and worse. Here we have a very famous team. Daniel, Gideon, Ben, and Justin. Gideon being particularly famous, and rightly so, because of the way he is as an advisor and as a person. Quite difficult to watch at times, awkward to watch. They do have a long and impressive quest this lot, and the Corridor of Blades is bound to finish them off with Gideon around. You'd have to blindfold and gag Gideon if you wanted to get Daniel through the Corridor of Blades successfully. And their situation on level 3 with the weird clue objects and the spell shade and, oh, you haven't got that sight potion, you need it, is odd. Even more odd is the situation of the team after this, Nathan's team on level 3, following Maldame's lead, as is always the right thing to do on Knightmare. Before that, unlike never take weapons, that's not always the right thing to do. Follow the character's lead in the conversation is always the right thing to do. And then to get told, oh, you should have asked Maldame for magic, and that's why you're dead. Utterly incomprehensible. Also incomprehensible is why they've used more than half of the series to get up to the end of Team 3 there, had 2 level 3 performance teams, either of which would have been deserving of a win, particularly Nathan's, killed them both off rather unfairly in level 3, and then been left with the situation where they feel they need to come up with the shortcut, which is the worst idea in the history of the world, and I will be talking about it in detail in my next commentary. One rant there about what a mess Series 8 is. There are plenty more I could go off on. Of course, I'm choosing the shortcut as my other main rant for next time. Many of the quests, particularly as we get beyond Nathan, do have rather a mess going on with the narrative. Particularly Michael's quest is a complete mess. Nobody on the production team knows what's going on, can keep track of what's supposed to be happening in the plot, as it were. The sequence of events is all over the place. It's weird and really difficult to watch. The Series 8 gets more difficult to watch as we get further and further in. And further towards a premature end. Now, this new antechamber set, it's one heck of a floor affair, isn't it? I wondered after Series 7 what would happen about the big hole in the floor that Bulstrode has left. The answer is, they completely redesign the antechamber. It is a terrible design. For the sake of the show, it's terrible. Everyone milling about in different areas, not sitting down. The advisors without chairs or stools is bad enough. I don't like the pool effect. But Traegard hanging around at the back. I was talking earlier about him becoming part of the background, and in the antechamber scenes, he is, quite literally, part of the background. No chair for the dungeon master? That's a disgrace. But the main problem with Traegard milling about at the back is that he becomes easier and easier for the teams to ignore. How many times in this series do Traegard and Megiddo have to film a little insert of things they were supposed to say while the team, Gideon in particular, in this team, were talking over them? Well, at least a couple of times. What a horrible piece of staging, adding a lot of horribleness to a horrible series. Thank you for listening to this commentary. If you join me next time, as I say, I'll be discussing the most horrible aspect of all, the shortcut, in my final commentary in this series of 16 commentaries for Knightmare, Series 8, Episode 9.